Good morning, everyone. It's Joker, and today we are back with another slime video. And today, excuse me, we are going to be going over Velzard's kit. Now, she just dropped in game a couple hours ago. I did my stream for her. Thankfully, I did pull her, relatively early, considering my luck at 70. So we did save ourselves a decent amount of crystals. So I can't really complain with that. At least we didn't have to go to pity for her or anything. But what does Velzard do? So we already knew her first skill was going to be the frostbite effect, which they didn't actually call it. They kind of called it frostbite, but they gave it like an actual title, which is Icy World, and frostbite is the effect. Icy World. Chance to give frostbite to all targets 100% for 2 turns at max level. So, before we talk about that, let's just go over her stats. So I do have her level 80, so I'm not going for dupes. I've learned my lesson. Do not chase. If you get them, go away. That's what we're going to do. And we'll pull her whenever she comes back on a rerun banner or something. Or if I really feel that she needs dupes, then we'll feed the dupes in. For shards. But she is a water attribute, obviously, magic type, attack growth, which she has a very decent attack stat considering that. She does use a water fist, which I did not have made, so I had to make one. But her stats are, they're relatively decent because, like Shizu's at like 1800 or something when she was at 84 or level 80, maybe even less than that. Gobta is kind of the same. So it's nice that she has a little bit higher attack stat than them. Her defense and her HP do suffer a little bit, but you can't all be balanced. You gotta be, something in the middle. And she's attack growth, which means she is a very decent DPS unit. And now, so single target water magic attack, 430, that's standard. So her first skill, Frozen Space at level 9, increases her own attack by 29% for 1 turn, and her own pierce power by 15%. Now, this will go up to 30%, so I'm not really missing out on that much by not having it at level 10. But buffing your own attack and your pierce power for 15 points, and especially by 30%, like the units that normally buff their own skills, they go 15, 20, 25% maximum, so I believe this is the highest personal attack buff that we have right now. I know, Space Reamer is 40% across the board, but that's also a 55 point skill that hits the entire team. This is 30%, 15 points, much easier to get, on top of increasing her own pierce power, which we know that the entire water meta right now is focused on pierce, on giving yourself pierce, and then increasing pierce power, decreasing pierce resistance. Everything about this team is piercing, which will come into play when the next Jubilee comes in like a week or so, maybe. So that's actually very good. I kind of wanted her to be another kind of special orb converter like Valentine, since the water team feeds off of greens, but I will take this. She could have had a much, much, much worse first skill, in my opinion. It could have been absolute trash. Like, it could have been some, like, little crappy, like, crit resistance debuff or something like that when the team is not meant to crit. It could be some attack lower by, like, 10%, which I'm not really a big fan of. They could have gone, like, the Leon route and given her, like, a single orb change, even though they already gave that to Raphael. So this attack boost and pierce power boost all rolled up into one for 15 points. Very good, in my opinion. Very, very good. Her second skill, like we mentioned earlier, Icy World, Frostbite effect. So the Frostbite, we tested it on stream. And one, it's a 2-turn debuff. Awesome, it says right there 2 turns. It does do damage over time for those 2 turns. When we used it against the challenge level Alice, she did take about 1800 damage on each turn, which was not affected by her defensive stat or anything, so it's just a straight amount of damage each turn, which it doesn't explain at all. Like, there's nothing in here that says how much damage you're actually going to take from this, it just says frostbite. So, that's, the first effect, is damage over time. The second effect is it increases the percentage of a debuff that you place on an enemy by 1.3 times. So, if, say, you are lowering water resistance with, Water Alice, and her Pierce card lowers water resistance by 30%, if you put Frostbite on the enemy, that 30% is now 39%. And then if you put, defense down, that Raphael does by 45% or 50%, it's now like 58-something%. And then if you put the Pierce resistance down with Wateranga at 30%, it's now 39%, which means that you're going to do considerably more damage putting the skill on. And you don't have to put them on in a specific order. Like, you could put all the debuffs on the target, send it all, and then put Frostbite on last. And then all the debuffs will then have their stats recalculated. Or you could put Frostbite on first, and then start sending the debuffs on the enemy. It doesn't matter what order you put them on. As long as the debuffs exist on the character, and Frostbite exists on the character, the debuffs will get multiplied by that 1.3 times. Now, it'll be interesting to see, especially on the water team, we're going to test out in a separate video, how good Velzard is and how much her damage potential is at. We'll do, the Big Daddy damage test for funsies just because we can. But this skill is very, very interesting. Like I said that in the lead up when they first teased her, that this could be very useful in other places, like EX Ifrit, lowering his crit damage by 30% with Light Mirren now becomes 39%, which anything to lower that kind of crit damage is going to be better. I don't know if you would take her into, Space Milim Conquest, but if you did, you could technically lower her Pierce power by a higher amount. Now, it does not affect buffs on you, it only affects buffs on enemies, which is fine, it's a give and take. If you put it, if you somehow buffed yourself by a percentage and debuffed the enemy, that would no longer, 1, be a 15-point skill, that'd be a 55-point skill. And 2, it would be very, very interesting to see like putting alt boosts and attack boosts and the pierce boost on top of that. So I am perfectly happy with the way her kit turned out. Even her trait, actually, is not the worst thing in the world. It is not the protection gauge that I wanted it to be. But when your troop contains 3 or more battle characters, you increase your skill points by 3 every 3 turns. So kind of like how Space Reamer and Windmillum increase your protection gauge by a set amount every 3 turns, you do that with your skill points. So it's a little bit different than, Valentine or Soe, who just gives you points at the start of the battle. This is over time, so you have to have her in on the 3rd turn and the 6th turn and so on and so on. But it is better than having some stupid trait where if you send a 6-hand full of greens, you lower their guard rate by 10%, or not even 10, like 5%. Like, those traits are absolute garbage. This trait is probably up on that second to top tier, besides what I would put as top is the protection gauge traits. So definitely her being a single target as well is very surprising, because I 100% expected her to be AoE because Raphael and Alice were both single targets, so I thought they're going to have to even it out, and they're going to have to do something to this Velzard, because her Frostbite skill is very interesting, so they're probably going to make her AoE. Thankfully, they did not, and we now have 3 AoE units in a row. The second time that we've gotten that. The first time was the Wind meta. Now the Water meta has 3 single target alts in a row, and this should be the last unit to drop for the meta. So we're not getting any more new water units that'll upset that balance. We're just going to have 3 single target alts, which is great for the DPS for the team because it really kind of lacked it. So I'm not complaining with that. So to recap, single target alt has a decent trait if you get dupes in her, has 2 very good skills and with very low costs. So I would consider Velzard a very good unit. Now, the question I got asked in stream that I actually had to think about a little bit was, do you pull for Velzard or do you pull for Raphael? And I still am considering that, because they are both single target water magic dealers. Raphael has the defense down and the Pierce power up, so both units have Pierce power up. But Velzard increases her own attack, while Raphael lowers target's defense, which, if you combine with the Frostbite skill, will be more than that 44%. But if you don't have Velzard, then you just exist at 44%, and this is a 55-point skill versus a 15-point skill. So, and you both need a Pierce unit, like a Pierce rate up like Alice or Xion, before you can even really make use of this second part of the passive of the skill right here. Because if you increase your own Pierce power, great, but if you don't Pierce, then who gives a shit? So, lowering target's defense by almost half versus increasing your attack by 30%, 55 points versus 15 points, you could make the argument for either side, depending. If you don't have Alice or Xion, and you have no way to activate the Pierce at all, unless it's like Beretta or Ranga, but that's not guaranteed, then you're going to have to look at their second skill. Raphael is a single orb changer and increases your gauge by 4.2% per green orb. You know, pretty basic. I'm not a big fan of these 4.2 to a maximum of 100 because I literally have only ever used the skill once. Because at that point, once you use it, it goes up to like 30, 45 points, and I don't want to use it anymore. So, and plus, Chloe changes all oranges to all greens, so like, it just seems redundant. So I'm not a fan of this. The Protector already does this at a much higher rate, so I'm not a big fan of this skill. And then if we look at Velzard and her Frostbite skill, that blows the second skill just right out of the water. So, if you have a Pierce unit that can give Pierce, maybe Raphael ends up being a tad bit better at a higher cost. But if you do not have a unit that can give you guaranteed Pierce, then I honestly would tell you to summon for Velzard, because you can use that debuff skill across the game in multiple teams. You're not limited to the water team, you're not limited to a Pierce team. You can buff your own attack with her. Just like Diablo buffs his own attack and lowers dark resistance. That can be used on any team. Whether or not he fits is a different story, but you can at least take him everywhere, and he's got the single orb change as well. Velzard, you can buff your own attack, you can buff your own Pierce power, so if, you know, in the event, the rare event that you do Pierce, it does more damage. And then you have that viability of the Frostbite skill. I mean, not a lot of teams focus as heavily on debuffs as the water team, but the possibility does exist that units down the line, maybe not even for the Earth to space meta, but for, you know, when they introduce new meta units for the metas that have already come and gone, it could become, you know, much more apparent, much more relevant. So, I think in that regard, regardless of if you have Alice or Xion and you have a unit that can give guaranteed Pierce, I would probably rate Velzard just a tad bit higher than Raphael. I think that Raphael will probably do more damage if you can get the debuff off with the, you know, defense and the Pierce power up, and then combine that with all the other debuffs that the water team does. But I think that for viability across the entire game, I think that Velzard is just a tiny bit better than Raphael. But that's it for the overview of Velzard and a comparison between if you should summon for Raphael or Velzard herself. In short, I think Velzard's a very good unit. I think she's worth it. If you want to summon for her, be my guest. Let me know in the comments how you did if you did summon for her. Did you get her first multi like a whole bunch of people I've seen? Did you take a little bit like I did, like almost halfway? Or did the game decide to shaft you because you want waifu Velzard and the game said, no, you don't get that. You have to go to pity. Because I pity you, you stupid fool, for trying to summon for waifu. I don't know, but let me know in the comments how you did. That's it for me, guys. Take it easy, and I'll see you later.